Okay, perfect. Okay, so I am way. I was practicing and didn't put it back on the title slide. Okay, so welcome today. Of course, if you want to remain off screen, I'm all good for that always. And if you want to come on screen, feel free to do that. If you have any comments, questions, or anything, you can either get yourself off mute directly or get the little hand up, and hopefully I'll see it here and I will get to you. I know that, especially since we're recording it, a lot of people don't like necessarily to comment what's going on in your world with regards to some of these more delicate matters. So I totally understand that, and I'm okay with that as well. That's why we always have the option of having a strategy call afterwards, which again is always complimentary, so we can actually talk through what came up during the call. But if you want to, again, chime in and give me your thoughts as we're going through, I will very happily do that. So, oh, I've had this allergies for a few weeks now. I'm getting out of it now, but you'll see me coughing a little bit as we go. So welcome to this class, which I named Endurance is Not Advancement. And the reason I put this together is because there's something that happens when the work stays and the resources don't. And I've been having a lot of conversations with different women wait, I'm trying to make sure this is being recorded. Is it being recorded?
Yes,
Yes.
I can
Okay.
see it being recorded.
I couldn't see the little thing. I'm like, oh no, it didn't work. Okay, so I've been having a lot of conversations with different women leaders on DM, and this always comes up, right? We're going through restructuring, we're going through layoffs, we're going through attrition and hiring freezes, or just the volume of work continues to increase without having the resources to go with it. So I wanted to put something together that would help women leaders in those situations. And this is a framework that I want to be presenting to you guys today that will help you with the thinking process, because there's no right or wrong answer here. And there's so many variables that go beyond the numbers. And before I go any further, once we're done with the presentation, you're going to receive the recording and also the trade-off conversation planner. That's a planner that I put together so you can, after the masterclass, follow the framework that I'm going to present today with a specific example that's happening in your world today. Something that you need to work through and decide how you're going to bring it up to leadership. And this will help you with that. You're going to get the link on that email later. So this is a phrase that really sums up what we'll talk about today. The work did not get smaller, but the team did. And we've all been in these situations, right? Where we just have to do more with less resources, less people. And sometimes we just want to keep moving and we just want to keep pushing. And as very capable leaders that we all are, we want to be the one that figures it out. We want to be the one that makes it happen because we know leadership is expecting that. But it gets to a point where you've already took out of the plate of your team and yours as well, all the nice to haves, and all you have left is the need to have, but you don't have the resources to make sure those things get done, right? You have a smaller team, but you still have the same commitments. You still have the client's expectations, or, it could be from a CRO perspective, the pharmaceutical client, but also when you are part of that pharmaceutical industry, your client is the other internal departments, your boss, everyone else that expects something from you and your team. You have deadlines you need to meet, all of these things. And there's a decision that happens at some point, even if it is to wait and do nothing because the team will figure it out and keep piling it on. That's also a decision. And the problem with that decision is that the problem itself of the lack of resources stays invisible. Leadership, the senior leadership that made some of those decisions, don't get to see what happened. So in their mind, what happened is the team is fine. They are able to deal with this workload. So there's nothing we need to do. Everything is working. In meantime, your team is working overtime. You're working overtime. You're trying to figure out how to do it all. People are dropping deliverables and potentially the quality of those deliverables, not intentionally, but just because there's just so much you can do and so much energy you can spend in a day focusing on something as challenging and complicated as it is clinical research. But I don't want to pretend that that conversation is easy with leadership, especially in this environment. I've also heard from a lot of leaders that are saying something, it's risky, right? You can be seen as the person that's resistant, or you're just not able to manage your team, or you're just being difficult. So I want to give you the tools to go from that to how do we say it, where we keep in mind that political tension, right? But we say what needs to be said so things can move forward and the decision is made at the right level, right? Because silence carries risk as well. As I said, your team can be overloaded. There's too many things on your plate and your team's plate. And at the end of the day, quality suffers. And you just pay it later, right? But it's still there. So the reality and what I want to talk about today is not productivity, time management, or the perfect script. You all have great productivity and time management at this point. That's why you got to where you are. You're all leaders, directors in the industry. And I don't like scripts either. I will give you some examples you can use. But what I really want is to turn that operational pressure into a conscious leader decision where you're having the right conversations so the right decisions are being made at the right level and everybody understands the consequences. The framework is very simple. Is first, read the environment. Again, I don't want to pretend this is an easy conversation, and we need to understand the political connotations. We need to understand everything else that's happening. So we need to look at everything, and I'm going to give you different tools to really do that very in a lot of detail, but fairly quickly. You need to make the impact visible. So after you've read the environment and you've gone through what's happening, you put together how you're going to frame that trade-off so you can put the decision at the right level. It all goes one after the other. That's the framework we're going to talk about today. And the reason I'm talking about this, as I said, is I did get a lot of DMs and I'm been in conversations about this, but I've led through this from the inside. I have 25 years of experience in pharma and over 20 of those in leadership. And I've led teams through my fair share of restructurings, layoffs, freezes on hiring, you name it, right? And I've been in the thick of it, having to be the one that delivered those news, having to be the one that works with the team afterwards, having to be the one that makes those decisions. But I also have the perspective of the person on the other side of that call, where in January of 2025, everybody knows my story by now. And if you don't, I tell you later, I got laid off, right? And as soon as HR showed up in that call with my manager, I knew what was happening. But just because I had been in it as well, I knew what was going to happen to the rest of the team that stayed. And I wanted to exit in a way that it was done, right? And I knew what was happening, but I know what that feels from both sides. And so now I help women go through that, women leaders, knowing both sides and supporting that clarity when some of these decisions need to be made and communication of those decisions. So these are QR codes. You can, again, you're going to have all these links later, but if you are curious, The one on the left is the link to that framework and the conversation planner, right? Where you can plan that conversation to frame the trade-off. And the one on the right is a free complimentary strategy session we can have. So again, if you want to discuss your personal specific situation and go through the planner and what's happening, we can have that half-hour call completely free, and as a thank you for participating and coming here and also helping you walk through this because it's just difficult to do it with everyone on a call. And so what happens is the organizational decision may be over and done, but the consequences will only start. It's a different story for the person exiting or the people, the team exiting and the people staying. Both situations are pretty hard to deal with. And so I want to make sure you have the clarity and the tools to be able to go through that. And as I mentioned, I knew what was happening before anyone said a word on that call, and a lot of people go through that. But it also reminded me of when I was on the other side and how the responsibility and the heaviness was on having to push the team forward with potentially having lost their supervisor or their counterpart or the support system. And so I want to make sure that we're looking at everything from that perspective. Because for the leader that remains after the restructure, the team is very unsettled. We all know that. We've gone through some of those situations. They may feel loyalty for the person leaving. They may be bitter about what's happening. They may be upset. Of course, they're glad they're still there, but they have that uncertainty. Is there another layoff coming, or am I next on this restructure? When this company buys the other, is my role still going to be here? And you have to lead because your priorities are still there. The deadlines are still there. You still have to deliver. Your team needs to show their work and need to push these clinical research studies forward, because we all work on these studies that have very set hard deadlines and timelines that we need to protect. And you're that someone that has to restore the clarity because you're the leader. You may not even have made the decision in most cases of who stays, who goes, but you have the responsibility of carrying the team forward. And the challenge is to lead without offering false reassurance, because you don't know what's going to happen, especially at these levels, without allowing the organization to mistake steadiness for the proof that there's no cost for that decision. And that's what happens a lot of times. We figure it out, we crunch it all together, and senior leadership thinks everything's fine. They may even think this restructure was needed. Now we have the right team because there's nothing happening, right? We haven't talked about the trade-off. And that's the endurance trap. And I like this word and this phrase. I came up with it one day, which is endurance keep the work moving. And I used to run at one point. I don't anymore. My hips don't like it. But it's that endurance, right? That things come at you, maybe a little rain, maybe it got cold, and you're like, I got to get this done. I'm going to get this run done. It's my 5 miles, whatever your objective was, and you keep going. But you may be ignoring some problems that are coming up, right? And again, when you just deal with it and you push with that endurance, the right level of leadership is not making the right decisions. And sometimes when nobody makes the decision because we just push the team to do it, it still gets made at levels that are lower and lower. The individual contributor ends up deciding what gets their attention that day. And that is not fair, right? That is not what we want to do, because things are going to fall through. Quality is going to suffer. And the consequences will come up at some point, but it's going to be too late. And I want you to take a second to read this, right? Your job is not to prove you can carry everything. I know it's tough. I know we've all been taught you just need to get it done. Get it done, girl. Just do it. Move forward. You are it. But read it again. Your job is not to prove that you can carry everything. Your job is to make that trade-off visible. while your leadership that made some of those decisions still have a chance to make that trade-off decision, and you get a solid recommendation and a solid guidance on what is going to happen. And even if it is just do what you can, it's documented. And that decision of not changing the way we're working, even though there's more work and less people, was made at the right decision. You just documents the risks. Because the decision is already being made, right? Either you name the trade-off or not, either you bring up the risk or not. There's going to be delays if nothing is done. The team will be overloaded. There's going to be quality risks. So might as well put the risk where it belongs and on the things that can support some risk for a little bit of time versus slapping the risk on everything because no decision was made. You miss work. And then again, it's that quiet deprioritization that happens at the lower levels where people just decide how much they can do with their day. And they get to a point where it doesn't matter how much you throw at them, they just do what they can, right? We're all human. And that is just, I keep coming back to the same thing. It's just not fair, right? The trade-off made either way, either at a leadership level where it belongs or at the individual contributor level. So this is the trade-off leadership framework. You read the environment, and we're going to go through each one, how we do them. Make the impact visible, we frame it, and we put that decision at the right level. Again, the decision may be at your level, but maybe it's at your boss's level, or maybe at a department head level. You have to figure out where that is. So to read the environment, before we speak, we need to understand what does speaking protect and what does silence protect? Because from some perspective, you may want to say, I don't want to be the one that says it. I think the team can handle it, or we don't need any changes. That's still a decision that you can document and look at the risks, right? Maybe the political environment is just, it's not going to go well. And you make that decision, but it's a decision I want you to make consciously. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy to just be the one that says, excuse me, this is going to fall through. But we're making that decision consciously. We're not just letting it happen. Because what each decision puts at risk needs to be evaluated before the consequences and before we have no choice, because the risk is becoming issues, right? And who needs to understand it and in what sequence? So you can decide what's your next move. After you've looked at what's at risk, after you've looked at what is happening in the environment. And then you can decide, it's almost like when we do a risk assessment, right? Not every risk has a contingency. Some we just watch, some we put a contingency on, some we decide to split into something else, modify it. There's a lot of options for risks. And the same thing is here, right? Maybe you decide to speak because you need a decision. Maybe you decide to prepare for a risk. Again, maybe it's at your level, so all you do is prepare. Document it, so then people understand why you made those decisions. Maybe you build support differently, or just wait. And if the decision is wait, that's fair too, as long as you've gone through the risks. So the first move is to make that impact visible. What changed? What stayed fixed, right? So typically in this scenario, what changed would be, I went from a team of 20 support staff to 15 or 10, or I lost a leader, or whatever that is. But what stayed fixed is the study didn't go away. The project they were working on didn't go away. The initiative didn't go away. So what is now at risk? Once you look at what's at risk, then you can make the right decisions. And when we're preparing to communicate that, and for that communication, if you go at it saying, we don't have enough people, that will probably put you in that category of you're just being difficult, you're not flexible enough. We've heard it, right? But make it a business impact statement. And I love that word because it just puts the intentionality in it. and it creates a decision. And the example I have here is with current capacity, we can protect X or maintain Y, not both. This is not a script. You probably need to put a lot more in there, but it's the idea that you need to carry of that framework of how the communication needs to happen. So don't stop at we're overwhelmed, we don't have enough people. Translate that pressure into a decision of what will change. So you go through translating that pressure, looking at what capacity change, what are the commitments, who absorbs the consequence, and that's important. You may have an overloaded team that absorbs the consequence. It may be a leader, it may be a project, right? When is this impact becoming difficult to reverse? So there's some things that you want to watch and make sure that you don't make the decision after the issue became a risk, right? So you need also the evidence to support what you are proposing. So again, instead of we don't have enough people, be specific. And I have an example here. We can protect the September client commitment or accelerate the new initiative on the requested timeline, but not both without increasing quality and delivery risk. You're putting it black and white. And if you've been to my previous masterclasses or you watched the recording later, you know how I'm a big proponent of state your conclusion, state the issue, state your recommendation first. This is that. And as you can see, it's not long, right? And then go through your thinking. If you go through your thinking first, people will challenge your conclusions. People will challenge what you were thinking. People will challenge. And by the time you get to your recommendation, it's completely derailed. Or you lost the audience because they don't care about all that. But if you shock them with a result, then they're going to listen. And they were going to ask the questions for what they want to know, not for whatever you thought they wanted. So let me go through a little example here. And this time I don't have clients' examples because some of them are a little touchy-feely, but I have my own. So when I was leading a group, there was a real situation that happens where the team got smaller because of attrition. We had a hiring freeze. We had a lot of deliverables coming, and we had to look at what are we going to do, right? We knew we could not do everything at the same time. And as I put it in here, a trade-off is never or rarely between important and unimportant work. The unimportant work, or what I call the nice to have, you probably already got rid of all of those way before you got into this conundrum, right? Way before you had to make a rough decision. So those trade-offs are really happening usually at a place where you have two things that are important or several things that are important, and you have to pick which one gets priority. And that's the important thing too. It's not that we're saying that work is not going to ever get done. It's like looking at it from a perspective of what can we move around. And they all become a risk at some point, but you make that decision consciously and intentionally. So in this situation, we had a constraint in terms of operational support team from the data cleaning perspective in one of our portfolios. And the head of operation, who was a lot closer to the team, brought up a potential solution, right? So she did the look at the environment. She looked at what stayed, what she didn't have, what needed to happen, looked at all of these studies in the portfolio, and came with a proposal that it was not a comfortable one, but it was a doable one, right? So she came to me and we decided on what are the studies that have upcoming deliverables in the next 6 months, and what are the studies that have deliverables after, because we also knew that another big project was going to end and we were going to get some resources. So nobody likes saying, well, we're not going to clean the data on these studies because we have risk, right? Then you don't get back to the sites on time. Even if there's not a deliverable, you don't get back to the sites on time. Maybe the monitors or the CRAs are not learning of the mistakes the sites are making. You don't have that feedback loop, and things pile up. but you don't have a choice because you have studies that with deliverables in a month, in 2 months. So we move resources. Again, it's never happy or easy to do. Managers complain, but we decided to move resources from those studies that had future deliverables but a full staff into studies that had immediate deliverables, and left a core team to support that baseline of work that was happening. Again, it was a trade-off, right? They're both important, but one had to come first. And wanting the work to be done, and that's why I highlighted there, did not create the capacity to do it, right? You can imagine project managers coming, no, you can't take the stuff from my team because my study, my client, my this, my that. It was not a win-win situation, but it was one that we could support. And at the end of the day, meet our deliverables in a way that wasn't comfortable, but it was doable. So really, my decision at that point, or my role at that point, was not to come up with the plan, but it was to challenge the assumptions, look at what was being done, make sure that I was comfortable with the decision at the level that I may have had more information, and give the go-ahead to do this, as well as I had to inform my leadership because I wanted them to understand as well. So I did not have to create the operational plan, but I had to evaluate it, yes, assess delivery and operational risk, challenge or refine where needed, because I potentially had information that the operational lead didn't, and approve the direction and accept accountability. That one's the big one. And basically, I like this phrase here as well, right? I did not choose the environment I was leading in. I did choose how I would lead in it. I didn't have a choice to get more people. I just had to make the right decisions with the right information, understanding the risk and approving it because the team needed the decision from me, and not just try to do what they can to make this happen. So I go back to this. It's almost like the previous one, right? Strong leadership was not doing everything because, again, I wanted to, but it's just not doable. But I was choosing consciously and intentionally what I was protecting. I was naming what would move and accepting the consequences consciously, right? And then going back to my leadership and communicating that. That was my role. So that's the second part. So that example went through the whole kind of framework, but frame the trade-off is that second move that you need to do if you are that leader that's analyzing the consequences and what's happening, right? And there's no ideal options, but there's realistic ones. And each one needs an honest discussion of the cost and clear accountabilities. You can't just leave the accountability to the people doing the work to decide what gets their attention. And each one of the options, as you go through this trade-off and the planner, you're going to go through what it protects, what slows or stops, what risk you're accepting, the capacity you need, and the decision for the timeline for that decision to happen. I couldn't wait until the study was almost missing database log to make that decision. Cleaning had to happen within a few weeks before it, right? We all know that. So I just walked you through in that example, all of these things. We looked at what was going to be protected. Other studies, cleaning was going to stop. What is the risk, et cetera, et cetera. And we needed to be prepared potentially to discuss it with a client, right? Because we were in a CRO environment. Maybe if you're part of pharma, you need to be prepared to discuss it with the right leadership. Because a new priority without a trade-off is just more work. And we all know what happens. Burnout, missed deadlines, quality suffers, and it's never a good situation. I get it. It's not easy when it starts or having to do all this, but it's worse later. So make a recommendation. As I said, start with a recommendation. Try to avoid explaining yourself before you get to your point. The most important thing to say, before you start is what your recommendation is where you want people to land. Then you explain it and end up in the same place, right? Saying, and that is why this is my recommendation, if they ever let you get there. Or you also wait to see what are the questions that come up, because you may not need to go through the whole spiel and lose everyone there as well, and the conversation gets derailed. So you start with, my recommendation is, I recommend this because this is what's going to suffer, or this is the risk that we're adding in this place, and a decision is needed by. Now, for us to make sense of all of these little squares and this 4 steps you need to go through in your presentation, I have an example here that's pretty easy. So my recommendation is to protect the September client commitment because the downstream regulatory and relationship risk is higher. Again, you can add client name, drug name, program name, whatever you're leading. If the new initiative needs to begin now, or the new program, the new whatever it is, the client milestone will have to move by 3 weeks. And we need the decision by Friday so we can get all this moving, right? So that's how you phrase it. And then you let the questions come. Maybe your next phrase is, what do you need from me so we can make that decision today or get it by Friday? And you're putting the decision at the right level, right? Because this presentation is happening with your leadership, with the owner of the drug that you're working on, the head of the department, whomever this conversation is happening with. You may own the analysis, the recommendation, the implementation, the looking at the resources, highlighting the risk, putting it all together. But you shouldn't own the authority you don't have to make some of those decisions that need to be made at higher level. So to land where that decision ownership is, you have to know who has the authority to choose. What do I own before the decision? We went through making all that analysis. What do I own after? Because after that, you're going to own execution, right? Making it happen. And what needs to document it and how. Because an unclear decision ownership, again, push the responsibility downward silently and permanently. And that's something we want to avoid. And I went through in my example as well, right? Expect resistance, because when you put your recommendation out there, the next level you're recommending it to, or the person you're talking to, may have different perspective, may have information that you or your level are not privy to. So they may not resist just because they want to resist, but they may be protecting a different priority. So you have to be open to come with a recommendation and expect feedback and expect people to question your evidence. And at the end of the day, that's what you want, because that's what happens when people are vested in the outcome as well. If they ask no questions, it's almost like, okay, I know I'm brilliant, but did you really understand everything I went through, right? I'm sure you're not going to say it in those words, but I'm just saying. Or they may try to avoid the implication, or hoping the team can just cover the gap. They just don't want to hear it, right? You can't allow that to happen. So you need to be prepared, and going through the framework will help you have all that information to bring that conversation back to what you need, which is the decision, right? So you go back to it. When it starts derailing, you go back to it. Maybe you ask questions now. What are we really protecting? Because now maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, and that happens sometimes, because now you have more information. They're protecting something else. Now you can prepare it again with more information, the risks, and your recommendation, right? But then things are going to be clear by then. You need to bring the conversation back. You can't just let it linger, because it goes back to the decision of waiting and doing nothing. So this is really, again, you have the link there. You're going to get it later. The trade-off conversation planner. will help you go through these 7 steps. I know the framework is 4, but it's going to walk you through planning that conversation. You're going to read the environment, you're going to name what's changing, you're going to then go to what the impact is. You're going to frame the options, state your recommendation, prepare for that resistance because you know something will probably come up, questions need to come up, and confirm who owns the decision by when. So as you're going through the planner, this is not for you to do now, but as you're going through the planner, look at what changed, what stayed fixed, what's at risk, who is absorbing the consequence, which should not be your lowest level, just doing the work, and who owns the decision. That's the reflection that you're going to go through. And it's easier if you have a situation. So if you have one now, that's amazing. Go through it. Go through the planner, put all your thoughts together. Let's schedule a call. We can talk it through. But if you don't have to do that right now, think about a recent situation that you can practice, because practice makes perfect. And you're going to come out of this masterclass thinking, oh, absolutely, this made sense. This is what I'm going to do the next time. But if you don't put it in practice, you're going to forget. It's not going to be as stuck to your mind as if you take action as soon as you can, right? Within the next few days. Now, the planner can help you organize the facts, compare your options clearly, and prepare for that recommendation. It's very detailed. It's not going to take you, I mean, it may take you between half an hour and 2 hours. I don't know how complicated your situation is, so I don't want to tell you. I would recommend block time, do it at a time you're not going to be pinged all the time, make yourself unavailable, get some thinking time, and go through it. It will not assess the politics for you. That's something that your own judgment will have to tell you. It's not going to challenge your assumptions or the sequence of the stakeholders or how you adapt when you get challenged. But it's the starting point that is going to give you the information you need to be able to tackle all of that. And that is where my strategy session invitation comes in, which is I want to help you get ready. So if you have that situation, go through the planner, set up a meeting with me. Here's the QR code. It's free, complimentary, as I said. And you're also going to get the link on the follow-up emails. Let's talk about it so I can help you think through it. Because as I said at the beginning, endurance keeps you moving, right? Remember my little running person? It's going to keep you forward. But really your advancement in your own career, in your own thinking, in your own leadership, the advancement in the projects getting done is going to come from making that judgment visible. And again, the last masterclass we had was about making your judgment and your actions and your value visible to leadership. This is one way. Because let me tell you, leadership values a lot more someone that comes with this kind of thinking, someone that comes with all this information, very succinct. It doesn't have to take long. It takes longer to plan it and put it together, but then you come up with this is my recommendation and this is why, versus the person that lets quality drop or the person that all it says is we're overwhelmed, I need more people. That's not going to take you anywhere. So that is what I have prepared for today. I know, Brooke, you're driving. I don't know if Kristen, Seema, or Brooke, if you guys have any questions, any comments. Did this land for you? Did it make sense? Is there any questions? I know I go through it kind of in one go, but what are there any questions, any thoughts that come up?
Hey, Vanessa, this is Brooke. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. No, it just really resonates with me of starting with the result or the recommendation first to leadership and then backing it up with all your reasons later. I think I've done the reverse a lot in my career. And like you said, I think there's a fear. I think sometimes when you start with the result or the recommendation, you have to be ready for a lot of questions. Like, well, did
Hmm.
you think of this? Did you think of that? And you're like, well, of course I thought of this and that. But I still think your way of doing it in this order is much more impactful. Um,
Yeah,
I think
thank you.
so. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it resonates with you, and I'm glad this is giving you something you can actually use the next time you need it. Because I've made the same mistake too, right? And that's how we learn, and we learn how to frame things that are going to get the result that we need. So thank you for your thoughts. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Seema or Kristen, any questions or comments from you guys before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. I thought this was really helpful too, and it also resonated with me about how not making a decision or is in itself a decision. So I think that's a good reframing of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the important one that sometimes we forget. Just letting it hang there, it's not going to make it disappear.
Hi, Vanessa. It's Seema here.
Hmm.
Again, thank you. Very thoughtful session. I would say it definitely helped me. And similar to what Kristen or Brooke said earlier, I have done reverse in the past, and I also learned it hard way. So one time that yeah, it's a alternate approach works better. But thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad it's helpful. And again, for you or anyone that's listening to the recording, I'm always open to have that conversation and help you reframe your thinking. And I mean, it doesn't have to be anything long or complicated, but maybe just helping you walk through it will help. And then maybe we decide to continue to work together in that call, but that's really not the objective. The objective is to help you walk through those the framework and the thinking and helping you think differently. So thank you, the three of you that were live with me today, and everyone else listening to the recording later. I'm always here to support, so please make sure you DM me, schedule a call. I'm happy to support and help because I didn't have this help when it was happening to me, and I wish I had. So that's the reason I do this, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Vanessa. I really
Appreciate
appreciate
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Have a great day.